So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this seminar where I'm honored to introduce my colleague, Lorrie Cranor, who is one of the most respected people in the area of privacy. She's not going to talk about her research in usable privacy per se today, or the work that she's been doing at the intersection of privacy and public policy. Instead, she's going to tell us about a topic that has been of high interest to her for many different years, and it's to understand how children think about privacy. And so privacy, as she's going to tell us, I'm sure, is a really, really interesting concept that means many different things to many different people in many different contexts. And I don't see too many 4-year-olds in this room, so I think we're probably all going to learn quite a bit, because she's going to tell us how 4-year-olds think about privacy. So Lorrie, the floor is yours, and thank you for speaking today.
Yeah, this is a bit of a passion project, more than a serious research project, but it's a lot of fun, and I figured I would tell you kind of the backstory about why I wrote a children's book about privacy and how I wrote a children's book about privacy, and some of the things that I learned along the way, and some of the feedback and reactions that I've gotten from actual children and their parents and grandparents along the way. All right, so as many of you know, for Data Privacy Day, we like to do an event where we go out in the public and talk about privacy. And so for a couple of years, we did our privacy event at the Carnegie Library. And as we were planning for the event 2 years ago at the library, and we were doing a walk through the library, and I was talking to the librarians, I said to them, if we're going to do this event at the library, we should have story time. Can we do a story time event in the children's room? And the librarians thought this was a good idea, but they couldn't think of any books about privacy that would be appropriate to read in a story time for young children. And so they asked if I had any suggestions, and the only thing I could come up with is The Eyemonger by Dan Solove, which I'm holding in that picture, which is a great book for children about age 8, 9, 10-ish. And the librarians looked at it and they said, yeah, I think this is too sophisticated for really young children. It's too long, it won't work with their attention span, and it's really scary. And the book has, the main character is this guy who looks like a dinosaur or a lizard or something, who has 103 eyes. And I know I've had this book sitting in my office, and all my students are like, oh my gosh, that guy is scary. So it is kind of scary for adults. It turns out I have actually read it to young children, and they are not scared by it. They think that a lizard with 103 eyes is actually super cool. But nonetheless, the librarians were a little skeptical about reading this for story time. And so I asked them, well, okay, do you have any better ideas? And the only thing they could come up with were books that were adjacent to privacy. So they found this cute book about screen time called Old MacDonald Had a Cell Phone. And it's a really cute book, but it doesn't really say anything about privacy. It's just about, like, get off your cell phone and go outside and play. And if you're a chicken, go, like, cluck with the chickens or something, right? So that really wasn't what I was looking for. Oh, yeah, there's a picture of it. And so I started doing searches in library catalogs and in online bookstores and asking all of my privacy friends for suggestions. And I came up with some picture books about keeping your body private, which is one facet of privacy that I'd like to discuss with young children, but not the only thing I wanted to discuss. And there were some about boundaries, which are also one facet of something I wanted to discuss: boundaries, personal space. But that wasn't everything. And here's the eyemonger up close. So I started thinking about, okay, well, what else do I want to talk to young children about? And maybe I could write a book myself and speak to young children. So I reflected on, well, what do children know about privacy and what should they know? So I thought back to my own children who are now young adults, but I had actually a very interesting discussion about privacy with my son when he was 4 years old. And he was asking me about what I was doing at work. And I told him that I was teaching the students about privacy. And he nodded and said, "Oh, that's nice, Mom." And I looked at him and I said, "Do you even know what privacy is?" And he said, "Yes, it's being alone." And I thought, wow, that's pretty good. In fact, if you look at some of the most famous definitions of privacy, for example, Warren and Brandeis from 1890, they say privacy is the right to be let alone. So that very basic, and it's kind of simplistic but accurate view of privacy is a reasonable starting point to think about privacy. And then I also reflected on another project that I did about 10 years ago, where I went around and asked people to draw pictures of privacy. And I actually started with kindergartners and got some really fascinating drawings of privacy from kindergartners. And this was part of a project that I did in the Studio for Creative Inquiry at CMU, which is part of our art school at CMU, where a bunch of us came together in a week and did projects that were related to privacy and security and surveillance and put them together in a book. And my part of the project was called Privacy Illustrated. And so I had gone and collected these images from kindergartners. And when we got the kindergarten images, we had the adults in the room write captions based on what the kindergartners told us that they had drawn. And then we went to elementary schools and had slightly older children drawing pictures and annotating them. And I went to a high school, had high school students do this. And then we went on Mechanical Turk and paid crowd workers $1 each to draw a picture of privacy. And then we took all of these and scanned them in and built a website. I've continued over the years to add to this website. I force this project on the students in my class every year. And there's now like 500 or so images on the website, plus a whole bunch more that I haven't gotten around to scanning and putting in there yet. But when we did this originally, we took all the pictures and put them on the floor of the art studio and sorted them and tried to come up with themes. And then when we put them on the website, we tagged them thematically. And so you can go back through them and look for all of the images that have eyes in them, for example. It's a common theme. But I also, when I knew the age of the contributor, I tagged it with the age. And so it's actually fairly easy for me to go back and find kindergartners, grade 1, grade 3, in this collection. And so as I was thinking about writing a privacy book for children, I went back to the collection and looked specifically at the images from young children. And I'm just going to show you a few of them here. So we definitely had this idea of privacy as being by myself that comes up a lot. We also had, this child is 13, but I think this is shared with younger children as well, the idea of listening to music alone. And notice they're wearing headphones. Right? So the idea that nobody else can hear what I'm listening to, so therefore it's private music just for me. People talk about private spaces in their home, places where they can go to be alone. This child says, I can calm down and breathe. It's something that a young child can do in a private space. We had children talk about having some sort of a clubhouse. My clubhouse in my basement is private. My brother and me have secret meetings there. This case, the child wants their brother with them. You'll see in a minute that actually, usually siblings are what we don't want with our private space. Yeah, lots of rooms that specifically mention or draw doors. Doors are in fact, an artifact that we use to have privacy. And sometimes doors have locks on them, like you see the one on the right. So I have lots of drawings also of just the lock part of the door. Similarly, this is from an adult, but the theme of fences is, again, a barrier, a boundary that we can use to protect our privacy. We also had both children and adults talking about hiding under blankets to protect privacy. And I think the blanket, both, you can physically shield yourself, but it also is that comforting idea. And so that's why, I think it shows up a lot. So I brought my blanket with me here today. Bathrooms, potties show up a lot. And at first, I only noticed them with the children. Children had drawn lots of pictures of bathrooms, even their pets going to the bathroom, bathrooms with locks and doors, and bathrooms where privacy invasions are occurring. Interestingly, there's a common theme here. I have a number of these drawings where you have somebody sitting on the potty and somebody comes in and everybody screams. That is what happens when your privacy is invaded in the bathroom. And then I noticed that actually adults were also drawing bathrooms, so not just children. And adults were also talking about privacy invasions. So this adult says, privacy means I can do things and not face public ridicule or judgment, like taking a shower. Who wants to have an audience while taking a shower, right? And then in a child's words, I'm in the tub and there's a rubber ducky. You want privacy when you're taking a bath. It's weird when someone looks at you. Quite true. So we see the same themes that adults have internalized that children are actually grasping at a pretty young age. Privacy when changing clothes. So both children and adults showed privacy when changing clothes. I think the most adorable one, though, is this one. Spider-Man needs privacy to put his costume on. Yeah, definitely. Also, sharing secrets. So young children also get that privacy is not just an individual thing, that you can have privacy with another person. So I love the big ear here that the child is sharing a secret into her friend's ear directly. Children are also worried about people taking their creative work or their homework or their schoolwork. There are a lot of drawings starting about first grade of kids who are worried about other kids in the classroom looking at their work. And so that's a theme that comes up. And similarly, we hear from artists that, I don't want to share my artwork until it's ready. I want to have that privacy to be creative, to practice my ideas. And when I'm ready, then I'll share with you. All right, here we have a sibling. What's going on here is that the sibling is outside the door, invading the child's space. She's screaming to her mother, and her mother is telling the sibling to stop. Here we have, when I want privacy, I hide under my covers, again, the blanket. I hide from my sister, specifically. And then this one, very clear. I drew my sister because she gives no privacy. So clearly, when we think about privacy threat models, and we are a young child in a family with siblings, the biggest threat to our privacy is our siblings. And that comes across very clearly in a lot of these drawings from young children. All right, besides these types of ideas, we also start seeing some animals in the pictures. So I showed you the cat in the bathroom earlier. This one's from an adult. It's a turtle. And we actually have a couple of turtles in our collection. And it had never really occurred to me until I saw these drawings that a turtle is actually an animal that carries its privacy with it. It doesn't have to go get a blanket. It's got its shell. And whenever the turtle wants privacy, it just goes inside the shell. And that is a really nice metaphor, well, not even a metaphor, like it really is the way turtles protect their privacy. So I think that's kind of cool. And so I decided as I was looking at this and thinking about it, that my book had to have a turtle in it. that was an essential element. All right, so back when we did this project, it started out entirely as an art project. And at some point when the collection of drawings grew, my PhD student said, maybe we could do a research project on this. This is enough. We could analyze all of these. So there was the whole issue of we collected them as an art project and we didn't have IRB approval. And we went back to the IRB and got approval because these were all now images in the public. So therefore, we had permission for them to be in the public. So it was okay to then analyze them. And so we wrote a paper on our analysis. This got published at the Privacy Enhancing Technology Symposium back in 2018. Also won a Best Student Paper Award for my students, which is nice. And I just went back recently and revisited that paper, and it has lots of trends and themes that we found in the data, but there was actually a focus somewhat on children in that paper, and well, what do we see about the children's drawings? And here's kind of just a summary of what we found there. Children under 10 frequently drew bedrooms, bathrooms, or cheating on schoolwork. What is missing from all but 2 of these children's illustrations is any depiction of digital spaces. It is not clear that children's visions of physical privacy translate to a useful framework for making privacy-conscious decisions online or when interacting with smart toys or digital assistants in their homes. So that was an interesting observation. In the adult images, we do actually have a lot of images related to online privacy issues. We have the names of various companies that people view as privacy invasive. We have images showing computer screens and privacy tools and eyeballs staring at you through computer screens and all sorts of things like that, which was absent in almost all of the children's illustrations. So as I was planning to write this book, I kind of had a dilemma about what to do about that. On the one hand, I felt like we would like to introduce children to the idea of digital privacy, but on the other hand, they are not actually spending that much time online or not even aware. When they are, they're not even thinking about it that way. They might be playing with their parents' phone, but they're not thinking about it as I'm on the internet and doing stuff online. I'm just like playing games on my parents' phone. And so I decided that I would have a little bit about online privacy in my book, but actually not try to go too deep on that, as I'll show you. So that was all of the background. And so I decided to write the first draft of the book. And there's the cover and the first page of the book. And I basically just pulled drawings from the collection and started writing words and finding drawings that matched them. My first draft of a title was "Where Can You Find Privacy?" And the book started out, "When I want to be alone and have my privacy, I go to my room and close the door." So I put all of this together and I punched holes in the pages and put it in a binder. And I took it to the library for Privacy Day and did a reading with young children and parents. And the feedback was pretty good. The kids seemed engaged. The parents liked it. One child told me, though, it's not a real book because it doesn't have pictures on the cover. It was just in a 3-ring binder. Thought, all right, well, we'll have to fix that. But I was encouraged enough to keep working on this. And so I went and talked to a bunch of people about how you write children's books and how you publish children's books. And I read about it, and I learned that you have to paginate things. It has to be, the number of pages has to be a division of 4 because of the way books are printed and the paper is folded, and you have to keep it really short. So a picture book for young children, which was my target audience, was 4 to 6 year olds. It should be between 24 and 32 pages and have between 200 and 500 words. That's not very many words. So my first draft actually was I don't remember the exact number of words. It wasn't that much higher than that, but it was a little long. And the first way that I had tried to paginate it, I think it came out to 36 or 38 pages. And I showed it to a few people who said, this is in the right ballpark, but trim it down. Really get it to under the 32 pages or less, and really get the words down. You don't need all those words. If you think about it, you can get rid of some of them. So I worked on that. And then I also realized that if I'm going to show this to more kids and get feedback, I need better pictures. And my plan was, well, eventually I will find an illustrator, but in a pinch, I will ask ChatGPT to help me out, right? So I went to use various generative AI tools, and with interesting results. One result was that there are certain things that they just had a lot of trouble with. So I really wanted a turtle hiding in its shell. And the Gen AI tools could not understand the idea of drawing a turtle where you didn't see the body parts of the turtle. So, I said, no, the turtle has to be hiding in its shell. And I emphasized that. Okay, here we have hiding in the grass. And I said, well, no, I don't want to see the head of the turtle. Okay, well, now I see the feet, but not the head. All right, I don't want to see the head or the feet of the turtle. Now we see the tail of the turtle. I finally said, just draw a turtle shell. Now we got it. Right? So it was interesting to see some of those issues in using the tools. And this was several months ago. It might actually be better now because this has gotten better very quickly. There were some things that it did reasonably well, but then I also wanted to have like the same characters follow through. And, here you can see the dog has changed colors from one page to the next. And then I said in this scene, I wanted a goldfish in a bowl. And for some reason, I got 2 goldfish in a bowl, or 2 bowls of gold. I don't know why. There was another one where I got 3 turtles. And I asked for 1 turtle. Why are there 3? So, I realized that this definitely was not how I wanted the book illustrated, but it was good enough that I could use it to get more feedback on the book. And so I put together drafts with these generated images, and I went and showed it to other people. I borrowed kids from friends. And then I went to the Carnegie Mellon Children's School and met with the teachers there. And this was great to get feedback from the educators. I got to have a meeting with about 10 preschool educators all together, and I showed them the book and got their feedback. And they gave me a ton of feedback, and I completely rewrote it after their feedback. But some of the things that really stood out, they suggested that I be very direct and give children very specific words and behaviors to practice. So, don't just talk about privacy abstractly, but say, this is what privacy is. These are words you can say if you want to ask for privacy. And that's what I did. They also said, make sure it flows like a story. It's not a story from the perspective of there's no beginning, middle, and end, and there's no plot. It's just, a kid talking. But it still flows and feels more story-like now. And then I also had a fascinating discussion with the teachers about the fact that young children actually are under surveillance most of the time. They need to be for their safety. And so if a child wants privacy and they are 4 years old, you're not going to leave them completely alone. And so what do you do about that? And in the school environment, legally, they can't leave them completely alone. And, in preschools, even the bathroom does not have a door you can close, right? Because the teachers have to be there. And so the teachers said that they do things like they are present, but maybe they turn their back to the child for a little bit to give the child a sense of privacy. They will make sure that the child is in a space that they can't do anything dangerous while their back is turned to them. So, for example, they said if a child is not behaving and needs a timeout, sometimes they will send the child to the corner of the room where they can sit and have a timeout, and the teacher is watching them. And the child says, "Stop looking at me. I don't want you to watch me." And so the kid is in the corner, and they said, if I turn my back to the kid, if they want to escape from the corner, they have to run past me, right? And then I know they've done that. So it's okay to turn my back to them if they are sitting safely in the corner of the room having their timeout. And so that was a really interesting perspective, which also impacted some of what I did in writing the book. All right, so after I did this, I rewrote it, and I felt like I have a really good draft here. How do I get a publisher? So I started looking into it. I started reading about it. I started talking to people in the publishing business, and they said, "You're never going to get a publisher directly because you have no experience writing children's books. Nobody cares that you've written adult books. Nobody cares that you're a privacy expert. That's just how it works. So get an agent, and an agent can represent you." So that seemed like an okay thing until I started trying to get an agent and discovered that you can't even get an agent if you have no experience writing children's books. So I did lots of research. I sent emails, and I would get back things like this. So this is from an agent who says, "This year I'm open to queries in the weeks listed below. In the intervening weeks, I catch up on any backlog and read projects. If you sent me a query outside of one of these weeks, I won't be able to read it." Right. And so, I get this message and I'm like, oh, okay. And like 3 weeks is one of her weeks. I'm going to send her an email then. So I wait 3 weeks. I send her an email, and then a month goes by, and then she writes back and says, "Yeah, I'm not really interested in your book." Right. And that was kind of the experience. And it was frustrating. And some of my friends said, like, "You're going to spend a long time emailing these people and getting all these rejections. And if you do it enough, somebody will take you. But in the meantime, you could just self-publish." And so I decided that maybe that would make sense. And I realized I had a friend with a lot of self-publishing experience. So my friend Lainey Davis, that's actually not her real name, that's her pen name, is a romance novelist. And she self-publishes all of her romance books. And so I called her up and asked her for advice, and she had a lot of great advice. And then I said, "Can I just hire you to be my publishing consultant, and you can help me through this process?" And she agreed. So Lainey Davis was a great help in helping me figure out what I was doing. If I wrote another book, like, I know how to do it now, but for the first one, it was helpful to have somebody with experience. So she said, "Well, it looks like you've got a pretty decent manuscript, but you need real illustrations. So we need to get you some illustrations." And so we needed to find an illustrator. What we ended up doing was we went on Fiverr, and it turns out Fiverr actually has a whole section on children's book illustration. And I looked through lots of portfolios of illustrators and came up with half a dozen or so that I liked. And then before actually trying to hire them on Fiverr, I then went and looked for their websites to find like more examples of their work. And this one, Elena, I really liked her work a lot, and I reached out to her, and she said that she would be happy to work with me. And we agreed that I would hire her to do one page of the book, and we would see if we could work together on this one page. And so I picked a page that had the main character and some of the other characters. And this was the first drawing she sent me. Basically, I said, the main character is a child. I want them to have somewhat ambiguous race and gender. I want them to always wear a purple cape. I want to never see their full face. I want them to have a pet dog and a pet fish and a pet turtle. And so this is what she came back with. And I said, okay, we're getting there, but I don't want to see the face, and that looks like a stuffed animal dog, and where's the fish and turtle? And so we went back and forth a few times. She tried a version of the kid with blue hair. That didn't quite work. Also noticed this kid has a cell phone on the floor. Like, no, this kid does not have their own cell phone. But we eventually landed here. And you can see with actually not a lot of changes, it actually met my specification for what I was looking for. And there was also room to put the words. The first draft, there was no place to actually put the text of the book. So I felt like by the time we'd gone back and forth a few times that we understood each other and this was going to work. So then I gave her the whole book draft, and I annotated the Gen AI pictures with my notes of this is what I really want it to be, and she went through basically 2 pages a day when she started, and gave me drafts. And so this is one that I think this was her first and last draft. It was exactly what I wanted the first time, and was pretty happy about it. Now, for some of the pages, she also asked for reference photos where, I said, I want some pictures in a preschool. And she said, well, what does a preschool look like in your mind? And so I went and Googled and found lots of pictures of preschools. And then I picked the couple that were my image of a preschool, and I sent them to her. And she drew a preschool that was, in my image. By the way, she lives in the country of Georgia. So some of her questions about, what does things look like are because she is in a different cultural context than I am, but did a great job in coming up with what I wanted. All right, so I had illustrations coming in, and then my consultant said, well, you need an ISBN number. And so she told me this is where you go to get an ISBN number. You have to buy ISBN numbers. But this is a total scam. You can buy one ISBN number for $125 or 10 for $295. And I wasn't sure why I needed 10, but clearly that seemed like the right thing to do. And then when I later found out that if I wanted to have an ebook, I needed a separate ISBN, I was like, oh, good thing I bought 10 of them. Now I can have all the ISBNs that I'm going to need here. All right, so I got my ISBNs. Now I needed somebody to print the book. And so my consultant recommended this company called Mixum to print books. And they have a whole online interface where you upload all your stuff. And it even has an automated system that tells you if your text is too close to the margins, and there are various things that could make it look bad. And you have to figure out what kind of paper you want, and what glossy or non-glossy, and what kind of binding, and whether you want text on the binding or not. And so we did a test print, and it was all good. And they said that they would do a turnaround. I said, well, can I order 200 copies? Yeah, we can turn it around in 2 weeks. That was a lie. It turns out it took 6 weeks, which was very aggravating. But yeah, that's how these things go. All right, so I got a place to print it. Now, there's a few different ways I wanted to sell it. One way I wanted to sell it is if I go to an event where I'm reading the book and I want people to be able to buy it from me. So a local pickup. So there's a company called Beventi that is designed exactly for this, where people can pre-order books for events, and they give you can buy it, use your credit card. They give you a QR code to show that they've paid. So we did that. But I also want the book sold in bookstores and on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and things like that. And so it turns out there's a few different companies, but there's really only one that has contracts with every bookstore in the world, and that is Ingram Spark. So they're somewhat of a monopoly, I think. And they do print on demand. So when you work through Ingram, they're not going to send stacks of books to bookstores. But if you go to any online bookseller and you order the book, Ingram will then print off a copy and mail it, and they'll get it in about 10 days. I think you can get it faster if you pay extra for Russian. So I used Ingram. Now, it turns out when you use Ingram, you don't make very much money on your book. And it was a good thing that I never intended to get rich off of this, or even if I can break even, that will be great. Because you have to pay Ingram, you have to pay for the shipping, you have to pay Amazon or whatever the bookstores that sold it, and so at the end of the day, there's not much left. But it is available all over the world, and I can log in and see where the book has sold. So last week it sold in India and Europe and Australia, and so that's pretty cool. And then it's then listed on all of these online retailers, but Ingram is doing the printing. And then I made a website so that people could read about the book there. But I also came up with a lot of supplemental material there for parents and educators to learn about the book. So there's a whole discussion and activity guide there. And there's kind of like a page by page thing, like as you're reading it to a young child, what you can talk about. And then I came up with swag. And those of you in the room, if you'd like some swag, I brought some with me. So we've got door hangers and bookmarks, stickers. And the door hangers, I had a lot of fun with. So in the end, the book was called Privacy Please instead of the original title I came up with. And I thought about, well, where do you see Privacy Please? Well, when you go to a hotel room, the little door hanger usually says Privacy Please. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to give kids their own Privacy Please sign? But what should you put on the other side? In the hotel, it says like, please make my bed or whatever, which I guess kids might also like. But I decided to put let's play on the other side. The idea that, the kid could signal when they wanted to be alone, when they were okay with interacting with people. All right, so eventually, I told you I had to wait 6 weeks, but the book finally came. It was super exciting to unwrap all these books. So I'm going to read you the book now with a little extra annotations as we go. So so this was the cover of the book, and I originally had a different idea for the cover, and when I explained it to the illustrator, she said, no, you don't want that. Here's an idea, and she described it, and I was like, okay, we'll try it. And she drew this, and I loved it, and so this was the cover. And I had told her up front, this character always has to have a purple cape. Why purple? Because, well, I like purple. But I also thought about the cape as kind of an empowering and privacy protective artifact. And the illustrator said, yeah, we need to have that, show that empowerment, have that, that look with the cape spread on the cover. And then, of course, the title fits on it that way, which is also nice. All right, this is the title page, and I brought that turtle onto the title page. Wanted to show, and the turtle is in privacy protective mode there. All right, the copyright page and dedication. So sometimes I want to be alone. I don't want anyone to see me, hear me, or come too close. This is called privacy. When I want privacy, I say, I want to be alone now. Can I have some privacy, please? So this is my simple definition of privacy for 4-year-olds. It doesn't get into online privacy. There's lots of facets of privacy we don't get into here, but it is that very basic, I just want to be alone. Don't come near me. And it gives people the vocabulary to ask for privacy. This is what I can say. I want to be alone now. Can I have some privacy, please? Then I find a quiet corner to read a book or play by myself in my room. Sometimes I listen to the music on my headphones so that only I can hear. And so this comes from examples that I saw from kids. And in the discussion guide that I have for parents, I suggest that it's a good idea in talking to your children to think about where are the safe places that kids can have privacy in your home or for teachers in your school, and to suggest places that you would like the child to go for privacy, so that they're not like wondering what would be the right place. I close my curtains so nobody can see in. Hiding under my blanket helps me feel calm. There we've got the blanket and the curtains and the blinds. It bothers me when someone comes into my space without asking. I ask my little brother to stay out and keep his hands to himself. And so here we have the first entrance of the sibling in the book. And again, we have some specific things that we suggest as an appropriate way to deal with an unwanted sibling in your space, rather than, say, punching them. I was the big sister, so. When my best friend comes over, we play in my clubhouse. It's our private space. So here we have the clubhouse. And here we introduce the idea that privacy can be enjoyed with another person. It's not just an isolating thing. A parent who got this book for her son said, "Your book has taught my son a new way to boss our dog around. He now tells the dog to leave his room because it's his private space." Sometimes we share secrets that only we know. So inspired by The Secret. I like to play with my friends at school. So here we're popping back out and saying, hey, we don't always need to be alone, right? Sometimes we actually want to be with people. But every now and then I need a break so I can have some private time to myself. And so then giving permission to say, yes, you can take a break. Even when you're with your friends and you're having a lot of fun, you don't have to wait until you have a meltdown and be told you need a timeout. You can remove yourself if you feel like you need a break. I had a parent of a neurodiverse child who said, this book would also be particularly helpful for neurodiverse children who may need more private time to recharge, to let them know how to self-advocate, because sometimes it is okay to want to be left alone. I've actually heard this from a couple of parents of neurodiverse children. When I'm feeling bad, I talk to my teacher in private where nobody else can hear. So this is another suggestion of a specific behavior, talking to an adult. The other thing here is, I knew I wanted to include this, but I was a little bit worried because there's a lot of sensitivity in schools about children being alone with an adult for safety reasons. And so I didn't want to show the child and the adult, in a private office or something like that. So instead I showed you can have privacy sitting on the bench on the playground if you're away from other people. A parent who had an 11-year-old girl said that her daughter told her, I wish I could have had this book when I was in pre-K because no one had a clue privacy existed other than my teachers talking to a kid after they violated one's privacy. I think turning the idea of privacy into a picture book could change the whole game. The part about talking in private to a teacher really hit me. I used to do that. I was bullied a few years ago and talked to my teacher in private so I wasn't called a tattletale. So glad to hear it resonated. Sometimes I want to create artwork without anyone watching. And so this is the idea of the creativity. And this is something that actually is a major theme in The Eyemonger with Dan Solov. The main protagonist, the other main character is the Eyemonger, but the protagonist in Dan's book is a young child who is an artist and trying to make art and doesn't like having the Eyemonger constantly watching him while he's making art. I am proud to show my project to everyone when I am ready. And so this is showing that you can have the agency to decide when you're ready to share your artwork. This is also a little bit controversial with the educators who said, we don't like to encourage the kids in our class to be like this. You can't see what I'm doing. Like, we want them to share. So this was okay, well, you can sit by yourself, and you can see in the first one, they're not hunched over. They're just away from the other kids drawing, but then they come out and they're sharing with the other children. Privacy helps us keep our bodies safe. We change into our bathing suits behind a wall or curtain. Originally, I had the clothing store changing room because that's what people had drawn. And then some of the parents I talked to said, I really try to avoid ever bringing my child into a clothing store and a changing room. Not a pleasant experience. So they suggested, how about the pool or the beach? And I went with the beach because it's more picturesque in a book than the pool. And we bring in the little brother again, trying to invade the privacy. And you can see we have the purple cape. The only time they ever take the cape off in the book, but it's still nearby. What do you do to have privacy in the bathroom? So originally, I said what you do, you close the door, and that's where the preschool teachers said, we can't read this at school if you tell everybody to close the door. So I had the illustrator draw a bathroom with lots of multiple affordances for privacy, and then made it a discussion, and hoped that children would also reflect on their own environment and what they can do to have privacy there. One of the adults who read the book to a child said, when the book says, what do you do to have privacy in the bathroom? My daughter said, I close the door so that my brother won't see me on the potty. So, that seems to resonate with kids. Privacy can help us have more fun. Superheroes need privacy to put on their costumes. So this is a reference to that Spider-Man picture. And originally, I was going to have a phone booth and have the child in the phone booth changing into a superhero costume. And everybody said, yeah, kids are not going to get that. They've never seen a phone booth. They've never seen Superman in a phone booth. They have no idea what you are talking about. And I said, well, how do superheroes put their costumes on these days? And, well, I guess sometimes they just have them on already, but it seems that they have the ability to just press a button on their forehead or their chest or something, and the costume appears. It's magic. All right. So, but that's no fun. And humans who dress up as superheroes still need privacy. So we had the kid go into the closet and come out as a superhero. It's fun to wear a disguise. And this is, again, supposed to be empowering that you can be a superhero, but this is also a way to have privacy by putting on a mask or a disguise. A grandmother who read this said, our grandchildren love the image of a superhero and could relate to wanting privacy in just the ways you showed examples in your book. Privacy is important when we use phones, cameras, tablets, and computers. So as I mentioned before, I didn't want to go too far into the online privacy, so there's a little bit here. My parents lock their phones so nobody can see their private things. So this was an example I thought most kids would relate to because they grab their parents' phone and it's locked. So this can start a discussion. Well, why is it locked? Besides, I just don't want you to use my phone. Sometimes I don't want to be in photos. I cover my face and say, please don't take my picture. And so this is designed to give kids agency and vocabulary to say, I don't want to be in a photo without just throwing a tantrum about it. But also to remind the adults who are reading this book that maybe they shouldn't constantly be taking pictures of their kid. And if they are, to think about where those pictures go and where they're shared. And in my discussion guide, there's a extended discussion for parents about children and photos and posting on social media. When I play games online, I use a funny name and picture so strangers don't know who I really am. And I think one of the first real online experiences that I think that kids relate to is online games. And so making it clear why we're not just putting our actual name and face online was the idea here. And I think this is also something which will lead to a discussion. It's not all spelled out here, but if this is something that a child is doing in their household, they can have that discussion. It's nice to put my technology away and play outside where there's lots of privacy. Right, so here we get a little bit at screen time, and we have the fence appearing here as it did in many images. Animals need their privacy too. My dog crawls under a bed when she wants to be alone. I originally thought about a dog house, and people told me that dogs don't have that's spelled wrong, dog houses anymore. And I was like, but Snoopy, everybody knows about Snoopy and dog houses, but actually today's young children don't know about Snoopy and dog houses. So, all right, the dog has a bed to crawl under. Turtles hide in their shells to feel safe. What do goldfish do when they want privacy? What do you do when you want privacy? And that's how we end with the discussion about the animals and then bringing it back to the child. The kids seem to really relate well to the animals. One parent said, the last page has the question about what goldfish would do to have privacy. And we have a couple of goldfish at home. My daughter said she closes her eyes and pretends to sleep. Sometimes she can hide between the rocks. I did look it up. Goldfish do not have eyelids. Which is so sad because they can't do that. Right? But nonetheless, that's interesting that kids would say that they close their eyes, because I think this also relates to how kids are thinking about privacy. If I can't see you, you can't see me. If I put the blanket over my head, I'm protected. And I think that's more along those lines. But this is a great kind of prompt for discussion. I end the book with a note for parents and teachers, talking more about discussions and then pointing to the website where there are more resources. I have the back cover where I have blurbs, and my publishing consultant told me I needed to get blurbers. And I had to figure out how to get a blurber. And after much thought and many emails, I got two fabulous blurbers. Stacy Higginbottom works for Consumer Reports, and I've done work with her there. I actually had a Washington Post reporter who had agreed to be a blurber until his editor told him he wasn't allowed to. And so I was like, all right, maybe not newspapers. And then Chris Houghton is the author and illustrator of Oh No, George, which if you've never read and you have young children, you should definitely check out. It's a super cute book. So a friend of a friend introduced me to him. So I have a real children's book author who has written many books to blurb. And once the book came out, I was able to get some good press for it. So this was in the Washington Post. I saw it online. I didn't even realize it was in the print post until my mom was like, oh, yeah, I saw it in the paper. I saved it for you. It was in a bunch of magazines, which was fun. I was on local TV talking about it. And just recently, the Carnegie Library now has 2 copies. I'm told that if you put in requests at your local library, they might add it to their collection. So if you think your local library should have it, you can put in a request. On the website, I mentioned I had a bunch of activities. So my favorite activity is the door hanger activity. And so I do have the template and people can print it at home and make it. But I also suggested that kids could draw their own pictures on it. And so in fact, some children have drawn their own pictures. This kind of stoplight theme is something that comes up frequently. And a parent said, the kids have been flipping their signs all weekend on the door of their shared room, mostly to get privacy from their baby brother. Common theme. We had an event at the Heinz History Center, and I read the book there. And we also had the opportunity for kids to make their own door hangers. So we did have a number of children make their own door hangers. So this one's a little bit older, and we have her symbols of privacy. We've got the lock and the key and the headphone music, right? And then the Let's Play, where we have the playground. So one grandmother who read this book to her grandchild said, "Before we started, my granddaughter said privacy is for the bathroom. I just expanded her world. She went up to her mom to tell her about it. Mission accomplished." And it's good to hear that this is actually resonating with people. And so I will end there and take any questions that you all have.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot about how siblings get mentioned in the illustration. What about parents? So they never showed up.
Yeah, so I think in the really young children, they don't yet view their parents as a privacy threat. When you go up to like the teenagers, then parents, teachers, all school personnel are all part of the privacy threat, but just not for the very young children. Yeah.
How would you adapt this novel to kind of help suit different cultures around the world? Like, I'm from Mongolia, so families live in one yurt or gid, and that's all that the space that everyone lives in. So what would be the best way to introduce the concept of privacy?
Yeah, so it's hard for me to say something specific without having been in that culture myself. So this is somewhat speculative. And this is also actually something that was brought up by the preschool educators who said, not all of our children in our class live in a house where a child has their own bedroom, right? They might be sharing a room with siblings or with their parents or whatever. So I would say, as far as finding the space, you can find private space. You can carve it out within a shared room. You can crawl under a table. Right? You can put a blanket over your head. You can find a corner, behind a chair or something like that. And so I don't know if there are certain cultural issues, like there's certain, maybe in some cultures you're not supposed to go under the table. I don't know, right? But I think within every culture, I suspect that there must be some area where one can have that kind of affordance of privacy, even if it's in a shared space with other people. And so my encouragement would be that they think about what makes sense in the types of spaces they have.
There should be more push into showcasing some type of digitalization, like how you said that was kind of I think you said it was difficult to represent through a children's book. Do you think at some point there should be something?
Yeah, so my hope is that we can have more child-friendly digital devices. I remember when my children were little, we gave them iPods, and there were no screens or whatever. We loaded the iPod up with a bunch of their favorite music, and they could put on the headphones and they could listen to music as much as they want. And we didn't have to worry about them going and surfing the internet or finding inappropriate content, or it was just a device that played music. And before that, when I was little, I had a cassette recorder, and my parents gave me a bunch of cassettes, right, to listen to. I have a concern that today's children might be given a device that is not as restricted. And I did actually check recently, and I see that there are some devices that are targeted as children's music listening devices, and none of them seem to be that good. I don't know if any of the parents in the room have found one that's really good. I'm hoping that we evolve to have some kind of more simpler technology for those very young children that is that safe space that we seem to have lost by now having such powerful tools, so that you can hand your kid something and not worry about all the other things they can do with it. So I think that works for really young children. At some age, they do want to go beyond your very locked down system. And then I think, we kind of need training wheels, and we need to educate them while they have the training wheels. And then as we take the training wheels off, and that is something that I think we need to be talking to young people about more. Joe.
I'm curious how you thought about secrecy when you were writing this, because one thing I've encountered was we also read our children a lot of books where it's things about like how adults can't compel you to have secrets unless you want to also have those secrets for various abuse concerns. So like we talk about the fact that what data does with you can always tell mama and so on. But we also sort of want our kids to have their own private lives and not to feel as though everything about them always has to be shared. So how do you think about navigating that type of balance?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. In the book, I basically just say, I sometimes share a secret with a friend, right? But
it's like a kid their own age.
Yeah. And I think you have to basically give kids examples they can relate to. I'm not sure that particular thing came up with my own children when they were younger, but another thing that did come up was once I think my child was like around age 6 or so, and I had posted some photos on social media, some family photos to only family could see. And I had kind of made it a rule that if I did that, I wasn't going to tag anybody in them. And the laptop was left out on the kitchen table, and I wasn't home. My husband was there, and my young child decided that she recognized these people, and she discovered she could click on them, and it was prompting her to tag them. And she's like, "Oh, I know how to type people's names. I'm gonna do that." And I was away from home, and I start getting email that people are being tagged in your photos. And I call my husband. I'm like, "What is going on?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, our daughter is tagging people in the photos." And I said, "Well, stop her," right? So he stopped her. And then when I get home, she says, "Why, Dad said you wouldn't let me tag people in the photos. Why not?" And I had to figure out how to explain to a 6-year-old why I didn't want her tagging people in photos. And so what I talked to her about was, well, once you put somebody's name on their photo, then forever, everybody's going to know their name in the photo. And I said, what if I posted your photo when you were a baby and put your name on it, and I showed it to all your friends? And she said, "Well, but I'm not a baby anymore. I don't want that." And I said, "Okay, so if you put your name on the photo now, when you're a big girl, do you think you're going to want your friends to see that?" Right? And like we had that discussion, and she kind of got it. And to this day, she actually is not very much on social media. I don't know if I scared her off or what. So, and she is in college now.
So we have a lot. Excuse me. We have a lot of things here in the chat. I don't know if you can look at them or if you want me to read them.
Oh, I do not have it up here. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll read a couple. So this is from Arika, and I assume that her name appears, so she's not looking for privacy. This actually reminded me of my freshman year dorm, where the RA actively encouraged everyone to keep their doors open so people could walk by and connect. Good for freshmen to meet new people. At the time, it felt totally normal, but thinking about it now, this is a pretty explicit norm that your default should be open, and you have to actively opt into privacy. It's interesting that the book is trying to teach kids the opposite instinct from the start, that their privacy is totally under their own control. Do you have anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, and I think there is a balance, and I was sensitive to not writing a book that would tell kids everything should always be private and you should never make friends, right? I think there's definitely a time and a place to decide that you do want to make friends and you do want people to come in, so I tried to show agency more than you always keep the door closed. And so I would hope in the dorm situation, while there's an encouragement to keep the door open, that there would also, people wouldn't hold it against you when you needed your space and close the door. I don't know in that particular dorm, but I would hope that it would be okay for people to go either way.
So there are many compliments in the chat. I don't know if you want me to read some or not, but you're getting comments like, I love this. I think children's privacy is often overlooked. And hello, Lorrie, this was beautifully explained. But I'm going to get to the questions.
Okay, great.
So one question is, do you have any plans for a book for the next age group, such as early school years?
I have no immediate plans, but a lot of people are asking me, and so I probably should start thinking about that more because I've been getting that request quite a bit.
Okay, and then in the same vein, I don't know if this is terribly different, in the absence of more child-appropriate devices, since this book covers kind of foundational definitions of privacy, could you envision a sequel that gets into more advanced topics like digital online privacy?
Yeah, and I think the more advanced topics need to be a little bit, older. This is 4 to 6 year olds, but 6 to 10 year olds, yeah, we could get into more advanced digital privacy topics, and I don't know kind of how to approach that yet, but definitely the ideas are starting to they're percolating.
Nice. So we have probably time for 1 or 2 more questions. Maybe somebody in the room for a change. All right. Well, this was.
Just really quickly, thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience. It appears that you did quite a lot of extensive research during, developing the book. Were there any topics or concepts that emerged as being privacy adjacent or kind of in the same domain that you saw kind of from the children or from your peers that you received feedback from?
Privacy adjacent concepts. So I think things like screen time are a privacy adjacent concept. A lot of these things have layers, and there are things about a lot about relationships, right? Like the relationships with the siblings. The building friendships, like there's a lot of adjacent things. I've had people tell me, your book is not really about privacy, it's just about navigating boundaries. And I say, well, that's kind of privacy. So, yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, so I'd like to give another big round of applause to Lorrie. Congratulations on a very, very nice book. And we wish you a lot of success. It sounds like this is really catching on. And thank you for sharing with us, the story of how this book came to be.
You're welcome.